Hi everyone, I'm Vicki Sun. I'm one of the co-presidents of the San Marino Pasadena Philharmonic Committee. My co-president is Diane Lamb, who is busy in the back right now. Thank you and welcome to our first open house. We are the newest committee of the LA affiliates, and our committee exists to support the LA Phil, both in fundraising and in volunteer activities. I hope you picked up a form that tells all about what our committee does and what the LA Phil affiliates do. I want to introduce Joseph Fennick, Stephanie Prom. They are from the LA Phil, and they are, I forget your titles, but Joseph can tell you that. So thank you so much, Joseph.
Of course. And thank you, Vicki, and thank you all for being here today. My name is Joseph Fennick, and I am the manager of volunteer activities for the LA Phil. My colleague Stephanie and I work together, and we collectively work with 16 affiliate committees at the LA Phil, which is really, really great. This is the newest of the 16 committees, and we have about 900 members in total who come together to support the LA Phil with everything that the organization does within the LA community. So there are lots of members to being, lots of benefits to being an affiliate member with the LA Phil. So I wanted to tell you a few of those in the hopes that some of you will join on board with us. But you become part of this wonderful organization of volunteers who are dedicated and passionate about supporting the LA Phil and the orchestra and everything that the organization does. You will be invited to special events, starting with the opening night gala at Walt Disney Concert Hall and invitational rehearsals that take place at the concert hall as well. And as well as be included in a network of events throughout all 16 of the committees. So just a few of the really special things that are involved with being an affiliate member. We also have many volunteer opportunities as well that take place with our education team and outreach within the community, whether it's volunteering for free educational concerts at the concert hall or going with other committee members into the community to tell everyone what the LA Phil is all about. So we really do hope that you think about joining, and thank you for those who already have. If you have any questions, always feel free to ask Vicki and Diane or myself and Stephanie. We'll be here afterwards. And one of the main benefits, last but not least, is being able to enjoy private performances like this. Our LA Phil musicians are so generous with our affiliates, and we feel very, very lucky to have their support. So thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Vivian. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Andrew Bain, our principal horn player for the LA Phil, and Vivian Fan, who's an accompanist for today. So thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of the musicians at the LA Phil, I'd just like to say thank you to you and to all of the affiliate groups that work so hard for the orchestra and for everything that we do. Without the help of these committees, we really wouldn't be able to do what we do to the level that we do it. So we feel very fortunate as musicians to have such incredible support. And I know, speaking for my colleagues, we'd love to come and play concerts in amazing homes like this, and to meet with all of you. If you're ever at concerts and you see a musician running around, don't be scared to grab them and ask them any questions. They're generally nice people. A couple of the brass guys you have to be careful of. It's pretty good. So Vivian and I have put together a little program that we hope you enjoy. We're going to start with the Sonata for Piano and Horn by Beethoven. It's in 3 movements. What else can I tell you? Pretty typical of how a sonata of that time went for 2 instruments. And there's a story actually. I don't know if you know this, Vivian, but Beethoven actually composed the piano part to the 2nd movement in the concert. Wow. In the premiere of this piece, he just made it up. He ran out of time, and pretty much, as you'll discover, the 2nd movement is very short, and he was on the piano, and he wrote the horn part, which is very simple. I mean, even I can play it. But he was at the piano in the performance and actually sort of ad-libbed and then wrote it down later on. So we're not doing that today. We're not making anything up, but we'll do our best to show you a recreation of that piece. Okay. I apologise for the water, but it's sort of an unavoidable situation of being a horn player. So we're sort of contributing to the drought situation. If you have any questions as we go, we're happy to ask questions. Just direct your question to Vivian. She knows how to. I'll start that. Okay. The next piece we'd like to play for you is not all of. We were going to play all of it, but then as we came in, we saw the food, and we thought we didn't want to hold you up too much. So we're going to play. We're going to play the final movement from Franz Strauss's Concerto for Horn and Orchestra, and Vivian will be playing the role of the orchestra, and I'll be playing the role of the horn. So, hopefully, we'll see how that goes. But it's actually, a lot of the similar material from the first movement is actually repeated in the last movement, so it's sort of like, you know, a condensed version of the whole piece. So you get all the best bits, but without the waiting around. Are there any questions? Anyone have any questions?
We're just amazed. Sounds wonderful.
Thanks. It's good. Has anyone been to the concerts this week at the Philharmonic? Did anyone go in here this week? Oh, you should go. Oh, it's not finished now, but you should go next week. Yeah. So this is the final movement from Franz Strauss, Concerto for Horn and Orchestra. Franz Strauss was the father of Richard Strauss, who wrote a lot of stuff for orchestra and opera and many other things. So this is a pretty cool piece. It's actually not played that often anymore. So we thought we'd revive that little tradition. Okay, sorry for the chatting, but we'll play something. like it?
Yeah.
Beautiful. So we thought we would move to something. I mean, I could tell you this is the last piece, but then you all know that there's a piece coming after that. So we'll just cut to the chase and say we've got 2 more pieces to go. How's that? So the last piece that we're going to play is a piece written in 2005 by Michael Conway Baker. Now, don't be scared. Just because it's written recently doesn't mean that it's anything to worry about. It's a beautiful piece called Remembrances, and it was originally written for horn, harp, strings, and a wordless choir. But I got a phone call about 12 o'clock. The wordless choir couldn't come in, so we just had to do it with horn and piano. The harp also got stuck on the freeway, but that's another story. So this is a beautiful little piece that we have played. How many times have we played this now, Vivian? Quite a few.
Right, I think this is the third.
Third? Third? I think it's more than that. So we're very happy to play this beautiful piece, and it's we hope you enjoy it. That's about it. would you like an encore? That's lucky, because we happen to have prepared one. Actually, to tell you the truth, we haven't actually prepared one. I've prepared one, and Vivian's prepared one, but we have never rehearsed this together.
Did you prepare the same one?
Which sounds scary. And it is. But I think we'll be okay. This is, I mean, how can you have a horn program without some Mozart, right? I mean, the most famous pieces of horn are the Mozart horn concerto. So, we're going to play the rondo from his fourth concerto, which I don't know about in the States, but in Australia it was featured on a McDonald's commercial. It was sort of the claim to fame of this music. It was their breakfast commercial for quite a few years, McDonald's. So you may recognise it if you've been to Australia. If you haven't, then hopefully it was advertised that way out here, I'm not sure. So this is the rondo from the fourth horn concerto from Mozart. He only wrote 4. So this is the last concerted work that he wrote for horn. Are there any questions? Anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit about how you came to play the horn, a little bit about your career, and then also what the role the lead French horn player means in an orchestra?
Good question. I started the horn when I was 12. My father taught at a specialist music high school. And one of his friends was a music teacher, and so we used to go to band nights and orchestra nights at school. And I studied the piano and singing when I was little, and I had to pick up a second instrument when I went to school, and they handed me one of these things and said, "You play that." So I did. But I always, the band and the orchestra, always was intrigued by 2 things: the sound of the horn and why they were throwing water on the ground. So that sort of drew me to the instrument. Sad but true. So yeah, and then I progressed. So I studied in Australia. I studied at the Conservatorium in Adelaide, in South Australia, which is where I grew up. Moved to Sydney and moved back to Adelaide. Had a job in the orchestra in Adelaide, and then had several other jobs, and lived a little bit of time in Germany. Back to Australia, and then was very fortunate to be offered a position in the Los Angeles Philharmonic. And I've been here this is my 7th season in the orchestra. So even though it's 7 years doesn't seem like a long amount of time, the orchestra's changed enormously actually in that amount of time. And it's interesting, I was just talking with some of the colleagues the other day that other than principal bass and concertmaster, Gustavo will have appointed every single principal in the orchestra, which for an orchestra, a major orchestra, it's really incredibly rare thing that one music director would have so much influence on the shape of the orchestra. The principals, my role is to lead the horn section, both administratively, sort of, basically boss them around. No, just to organise, make sure we've got enough people on the stage at any one point in time and assign parts. In a horn section, we have 6 positions in the French horn section in the LA Phil. We have the principal, which is me, an associate principal, which is vacant at the moment. Second horn, which is Greg Russo, who's about 6'5" and makes me look like 3'6". His wife is the third horn. They came in on separate auditions and both won their job with extremely high levels of playing. So Amy Jo Ryan is the third horn, and the fourth horn is Brian Drake, and Brian's been in the orchestra I think for 37 years. So he was appointed by Giulini back in the Giulini days. And the assistant is Ethan Bierman, who's a Californian native, actually, Southern California native. So they're the 5 members of our section, and then we hopefully will make a 6th member to come into the group in the spring, is the hope. So my job is to coordinate the section, make sure that everyone knows what they're doing, and then artistically, basically, as a bit of a conduit from the conductor to the group to relay information that needs to get through, or sort of shape the artistic idea of the horn section. I have to play the first horn parts, so that's pretty straightforward. Probably most of the solos are in that part, so there's a fair bit of solo stuff that happens in the orchestra. And then also I coordinate with the other principals on artistic things within the orchestra. So if the trumpets are playing something a certain way and we're playing it another certain way, Tom and I will have a chat. This doesn't happen very often, and just decide, okay, what do we think, whoever the conductor is, what do you think they want, or what are we matching up with? Are we matching up with the strings? Are we lining up with what's going in the woodwind section? The position of French horn, first horn and the horn section is one that's very unique in an orchestra. The horn section is like the centre of the wheel. We're coordinating it all the time with the wind section and the brass section and the string section. And it's most, so for example, the principal flute will obviously be interacting with the strings, but most of their stuff is going to be related to the woodwind section. And the trumpets and trombones, they're off in their own room, to the back of the stage, and they're basically they're trying to just make sure that they stay awake. And play their part and stick with the conductor. And the strings are playing their string things. But the horn is one of those positions where we're interacting with a lot of different sections. A lot of times I'll have a duet with the flute, for example, and then 2 minutes later I'll have a fanfare with the brass, and then I may have a solo with the concertmaster, or I may have to be blending with the cello section. Our voice as an instrument, the register that we're written in, probably is best matched with bassoon, clarinet, and the viola, cello section, and trombones. But we sort of, in Brahms, we play a lot with the violins, a lot of melodies with the cello, a lot of stuff, a lot of interaction with the woodwind section. In Mahler, it's a very heroic instrument a lot of the time, and then in the slow movement, it's very lyrical and very accompanimental as well. So it's a fun part of being a horn player, is that you have to take on all these different roles and be hopefully flexible most of the time. Does that answer the question?
That's very interesting. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
I have a follow-up question.
Oh yes, okay.
The provenance of your instrument and
Of this one?
yeah, well, the instruments that you play, I guess.
Right. So this one is actually you won't see many of these in the States. You'll see in every orchestra in Germany will have this particular horn. It's a German-made horn made in Mainz, about half an hour outside of Frankfurt Airport. It's a factory called Alexander and Brothers, and the Berlin Philharmonic plays pretty exclusively on these horns. They're a slightly different sound than what the traditional American sound is, but in our section it tends to work, and for Disney Hall it tends to work very well. And it's something that I have played on before I came to this orchestra when I was living in Germany and when I was living in Australia, so it suits me very well. I have about 14 horns that I own, and some of those are for specific purposes and others are just because just a bit silly. So the typical American horn comes from originally from Germany. It was sort of like this design set was imported to the States, and most of these horns are made in Chicago. Carl Geyer is a slightly different design of horn, and was sort of traditionally made famous by the Chicago Symphony. Most American orchestras will play on those horns. In the movies, they play horns that are not yellow or brown. They're nickel horns with a lot larger bell than this, and they're designed to sound beautiful on a recording microphone. The Cleveland Orchestra is probably the only major orchestra now that exclusively plays on those. They're called Con 8D is the model. And the Cleveland Orchestra is very much holding onto the tradition of that style of sound. The LA Philharmonic section was sort of in that ilk, probably until I came and destroyed that. But yeah, it's not through. The nice thing about the horn and orchestras around the world is that most orchestras are very flexible and will change with good ideas and discard the bad ones. But if you have an opportunity to listen to the recordings of the Cleveland Orchestra, it's a very distinctive sound, very rich and warm and round sound. So French horn, we're always in search of trying to find the horn that doesn't make any mistakes.
Now, with all of them made in Germany, how did it get made in the French horn?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it actually should be called a Bohemian horn because it's really its roots are in Bohemia, and I have no idea why it's called a French horn.
And the English horn is very different.
English horn is like a big version of an oboe.
Okay. Oh.
It's the one that has like a bulb on the bottom of the instrument. It's a bit longer and a bent crook that comes out. Yeah, but it's pitched in the same key as the French horn. But French horn, yeah, I really don't know why it's called French horn, and it makes no sense. But maybe that can be, you guys can research that and tell me. I'll see if someone will run up in the concert and say, Andrew, I found the answer. This is okay, so let you get you food, huh? Food and drinks. Always a good thing. So this is the last movement of Mozart 4. The first ever rehearsal and performance with Vivian and I.
incredible pleasure for all of us. We don't want it to end, so we'd like to see if there's any more questions, and I also have a quick question I'd like to throw in. We understand that one of the highlights of your career has been to play with John Williams on the Star Wars Awakens project, and which sounds super exciting. We were wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that experience, and if there are any other upcoming motion pictures that we can be eagerly listening for you in the future.
Okay. The Star Wars thing was really weird because when you get called to play in the studios, they just send you an email with a bunch of dates, and they might tell you the composer. And so I got this email from, it's called the Dateline. And when I first got an email, I thought, I'm married, I don't need to. But then I realised they were offering me something else. So, it was all these dates for John Williams, and it was called Avco was the movie. And I thought, what's Avco? What movie is that? And then a friend of mine is the principal horn in the London Symphony, and all of the Star Wars movies up to this point were recorded in London by the LSO. And he was out here, or he was coming out for the 2015 International Horn Symposium that we hosted at Colburn. And he said, it might be a bit of a problem around that time because we're recording Star Wars, so I might not be able to come. And I looked at these dates. This was about 2 weeks before I got this email. And I was like, they're about the same dates that he was talking about. John Williams can't be in two places at once. So I did a little bit of research and found out that it was actually Star Wars, and that John was not really interested in travelling to London as much as he had done previously. So that was pretty exciting, because I think for any little horn player, or even big horn player, to play the music of John Williams is always a great treat. And I think if you talked to 10 horn players, probably 9 of them would say one of the main reasons they started playing the horn was Star Wars, or something to do with John Williams' music. So I'd met John a few times. He's good friends with Gustavo, so I'd met him backstage at the Philharmonic several times. But this was the first chance that I had to really work with him very closely. So it was a really amazing experience. That we recorded the movie over about 5 months. It took quite a long time. The way that they edited the film and the way that it turned out was just that they recorded in little pieces. So there were a lot of really cool things for the horn, and the atmosphere in the studio was like nothing I've ever experienced before. There was such an excitement that this film was being recorded in Los Angeles. So all the musicians were extremely excited, and pretty much everyone who had anything to do with it was thrilled. I'm also fortunate to have recorded the next one that's coming out in December, which will be, hopefully sounds all right. We'll see. And we actually just finished working with John last week on the new Steven Spielberg film, The Post. So that will be coming out. I'm not really sure if it's before the end of the year, probably before the end of the year, but it's about the Washington Post. Yeah, I think it's in the time of Nixon and JFK. I think that's what it is. I don't think it's anything to do with Trump. So probably less exciting, but still probably a pretty good film. So it's working with John is amazing. He's as a film composer, he's really the most amazing person. His ability to put music into a character and to draw out emotion, and just from a scene, you look at a scene and you think, oh yeah, that looks like a nice scene, and then you put John's music to it and it completely enhances everything. And if you've ever seen clips on YouTube or on Facebook of Star Wars without the music, it's pretty average. It's still an okay film. I mean, all the films are okay, but if you take John's music out of a lot of the films that he's done, they're greatly diminished. So he's such an amazing musician, and we see him a lot at the Philharmonic. We did a gala a few years ago featuring his music, there's some activities coming up where we're going to be closely working with John at the LA Phil, as well as obviously in the studio. So
Thank you. What is that instrument that you associate with at the beginning of the Star Wars?
Well, I associate the horn. The trumpet is pretty prominent at the beginning, there's a lot of trumpet stuff in Star Wars, there's a lot of horn stuff. A lot of the emotional stuff in film music is horn, and actually English horn is a lot of things, but oboe. The great thing about John's writing is that he really understands each instrument and what each instrument can bring to the film and bring to a scene. So the film, The Post, you listen to that and there's a few scenes where you can probably imagine it being the same composer as Star Wars, but he uses a completely different palette of sounds and colours with the orchestra. He understands, you know, it's obviously a completely different film, a different mood that he's trying to create, and he understands what each instrument brings to that. The good thing is he understands the horn really well, so even when they change the mood, we've still got something to do. So we can do the heroic stuff, and then we get to do the delicate stuff. So Star Wars is a lot of fun. Like a lot of the big themes are the whole horn section, and then a lot of the delicate stuff is for one horn on its own, which is nice. And the best part about playing film stuff is if you make a mistake, you get to do it again. And they generally don't put the bad one into the film. Yeah, that's good.
Can you talk about the interest of children or kids or adults in learning to play the French horn, and what kind of people does it attract? Because it tends to be very, at least in my opinion, niche. So do you see it becoming more popular, or maybe not, because of the instrument, whatever?
I think most kids will start, which I think is a good idea, most kids will start on piano or violin. Horn is something that is a little bit later in life because it's a relatively large instrument, so it's more difficult for, like, you know, I mean, what are the elementary school kids to hold the instrument. They're designing a plastic horn, and which sounds great. And also small ones with a smaller wrap so that it's a little bit more compact for little kids. But a lot of kids will start, if they're interested in the French horn, it's probably good to start on the trumpet. They can start on trumpet and then move to horn. A lot of people will change over to the French horn. I don't know that the French horn's ever going to be the most popular instrument, because I remember when I was in school, and so this horn, in order for me to put it in, to carry it around, it comes apart in two pieces, which makes it very convenient. You stick it in a backpack and you go on a plane with it and no one even knows what it is. It's great. When I was a kid though, this didn't come off, so I had to find a case that fit it, and it's like carrying around an elephant. And so I think any kid would think, why would I want to do that when I could play the clarinet and have like a little tiny box that I have to walk around with? So I think the advent of the detachable bell is probably going to help the horn in some ways, but I don't think it's going to be. It's a very difficult instrument to play. It's been sort of widely agreed that the horn and the oboe are the two most difficult instruments in the orchestra to play. I would say that was wrong. I would say the horn is definitely the most difficult instrument to play. But it's also, I think it's also, from my point of view, is the most rewarding instrument to play. So there's so much great repertoire written for the horn in orchestral writing and solo and chamber music that we're very, very fortunate. And we get our own voice in the orchestra. If you're a violinist, you're one of 16 first violins, 12 second, or 14 second violins. If you're a viola player, you're one of 12. So it's more of an individual instrument in that way, but you need to be a little bit crazy, and and happy for things to go wrong, because on the French horn things will go wrong, and you need to be able to deal with that. As a professional, you need to be able to deal with that in a way that, you know, if you make a mistake, it's not something that's going to, you can't dwell on it for too long. Otherwise, it would just be, there'd be horn players just be all lying all over the place. But yeah, the French horn, it's difficult. The harmonic series of the French horn is the same as any brass instrument, but where the horn is written for is very high in the harmonic series. So that means the harmonics, or the notes on each, let me give you an example. The notes on each, the possibilities for getting the wrong note are very high. Let me put it that way. So on one set of tubing, so as I get higher, the notes get closer together. So if I'm playing a high note on the French horn, I could be going for a G, and I could hit an A or a G or an F or an E flat or a whole bunch of, sometimes all three or four at the same time. So the level of accuracy of hearing the pitch that you want to play needs to be very high, and the amount of control with the lips needs to be very high. With the trumpet, it's effectively that where the notes are written for on the trumpet is effectively a fifth lower. So if you can imagine the distance between the notes on the trumpet is sort of this in their regular range, and the distance for notes on the French horn is about that.
Wow.
So that's, trumpet's easy, horn very difficult. Pretty much comes out. Yeah. But in terms of popularity, I think that's one of the things that's challenging for kids, is because it's very difficult it's a difficult instrument to start on. And if you don't have a really good ear, if you're not a natural singer, it's quite a challenging instrument to play. Yeah.
Great. Well, anyone have any other questions? No? Well, we have something small for you.
It was my 1-year-old's first birthday party yesterday, so we've been opening a lot of presents.
Andrew,
Thank you so much.
An incredible treat for all of us here. It's just been amazing. So we thank you very much for you coming out today and making this all possible. I do want to also thank our HMS Huntington Middle School talented Corey Tsai, Lawrence Chow, Caitlin Ng, and Christopher J. We thank you so much for coming today and also playing for us. Our community is filled with really talented young musicians, so we hope that Andrew and Vivian inspired you today to continue your music education. We also cannot leave today without thanking Irene Awan, whose beautiful home has hosted this event for us today. So where's Irene? She's coming through. I'll thank her on our way out. But anyway, she did an amazing job hosting us at her home, so it's just been fantastic. So that concludes our evening, our afternoon. We do have refreshments, desserts, and drink for all of you, please, to enjoy and mill around and talk. We have our membership table set up, so please ask any of the members for information on our group if you're interested. Joseph and Stephanie will be also out there. So please pick up our calendar of events. We have, it's written out on a piece of paper, and it would be easy for you to see what's coming up. Again, as you know, the Los Angeles Philharmonic will be celebrating their centennial next season. And so they have incredible events in store that are in the planning and actually on the calendar. So we would definitely encourage you to go to the concerts in the upcoming year and join us. So again, thank you all for coming. Thank you. So.